Welcome. Today, we're talking about a topic of security, and we all know how relevant this topic really is today. Before we jump in, allow me to introduce myself and my co-host. I'm Andre. I'm a customer success manager with Wrike and your host today. With me, I have Alex Homa, who's a customer success strategic program lead for ABJ, and a seasoned expert on Wrike as a product. Before we hand it over to Alex, let's talk about why we are here today. The objective of this session is to explore the security features of Wrike and how they can help you protect your Wrike instance and all of its data. You will learn how to manage permissions, set up policies for protecting your account, optimize access roles and user types, and understand the difference between them, and enhance governance practices. The session will take roughly 60 minutes and we'll have a Q&A in the end for you to ask questions. With that said, feel free to submit questions through the Q&A section of Zoom and we'll make sure to answer these questions for you. Wrike really invests a lot in R&D for security and privacy controls, and we're excited to work with accounts for whom those aren't just empty words. ABUS is one of such customers. They were looking for a solution that would help solve issues with communication, port transparency, and accountability. But they didn't need just any tool. It was essential for them to have a solution that is hosted in the European data center that complied with European data protection law. And Wrike was able to check all these boxes. Also, the flexible user rights, ability to share information on the need-to-know basis, and advanced data encryption added an extra layer of security. So at the end of the day, ABUS was able to structure their work better and achieve and improve transparency, collaboration, and set up and document processes that everyone in the company could understand and follow. And the user experience was intuitive enough to make it a breeze to set up and manage. If you want to learn more about this particular customer or other customers and their experiences with Wrike, I will put a link into the chat for you for our case studies in just a second. And to show you how you can take advantage of all of these capabilities, I'm turning this over to Alex. Alex, take it away.
Hello, Andre, and hello, everybody in the room. It's nice to be here. My camera is working, and I'm hoping you can all hear me okay. Fantastic. And then it's at this point as well that I'll probably hit share screen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all and talking about security. It's a topic that's near and dear to, or at least setting up permissions and clamping down and giving people certain rights and access. Is incredibly important and one that I've experienced with my customers for some time. Our customers go through setting up Wrike. It's really simple to set up Wrike. You can get in there and put together a folder structure really quickly and easily, and that's fantastic. But as soon as you start to scale that out, you will find that you probably don't want everybody just creating a folder. You may not want everybody just creating a custom field, and you probably don't want everybody inviting anybody into the account. And so these kinds of components you probably want to start locking down on. And so we'll be focusing on how to control a lot of those elements, as well as how to kind of, at an account-wide level, at a user level, at a particular folder, space, and all that sort of stuff. And we'll go through all those details. I also want to highlight that we'll be going through this exercise using Wrike Enterprise. Our enterprise solution is the most crammed with security functionality. You scale what's available to you back from here, and we'll share with you as well on our help page what specific security functionality is and isn't available throughout the various packages. But like I said, I want to highlight this. We're starting here with at our enterprise subscription. And I also encourage anybody to share questions. Give them to us in the Q&A section of Zoom. If failing that, put them in the chat. But yeah, we want to hear from you. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you've got questions as they come, please let me know. So you've seen Wrike. We're in Wrike, or at least I hope we have some experience of using spaces, folders, projects, tasks, and things like that. Where when it comes to security, the first thing that you'll want to do, however, is start controlling your actual users and putting them into categories in their own right. So putting users into what we labeled as user groups. Now, you'll notice as an account owner, I've got full rights and access to this. As an administrator, you may have visibility and rights to this, and I'll touch on what an administrator's can and can't do in a moment as well. But it starts with the owner and essentially them applying and giving users rights to what can and can't be done in their instance. So I've logged in as the account owner and I go to my user section, and you'll notice here within that section, I've got different teams. Now, how you categorize your instance is dependent typically on maybe department or region or sub-departments. It might make sense to create a, say, HR department or human resources as a user group, and then within human resources, create further subgroups if you needed to. This is an important step because it means that when we start sharing things, we start sharing it with user groups. It makes it much simpler to share a space with a user group and apply permissions and rules at a group level, right? Rather than trying to individually assign specific roles and what you can and can't do. So I would absolutely recommend step one, if you haven't already, create yourself some user groups, okay?
Quick question on this, Alex. Are
Yeah.
all of the user groups have to be maintained by someone, or are there any dynamic groups that exist in Wrike?
Help me understand. Dynamic groups, you mean by?
Meaning groups that will be updated by the system itself.
Groups that will be updated by the system themselves. No. The short answer is you'll want to have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, by the way, but to the best of my knowledge, you'll want to have someone that handles and manages the user groups themselves. There are access roles that you can apply to user types, and I'll touch on that in a moment as well. But as far as managing user groups, it's either through the API, you can pull that through from there as well. You could potentially have it tied with your user management solution as well as an option, as an API integration if you wanted to. But within Wrike, it's by the user. It's here with internally.
That is absolutely the case. Thank you for that, Alex. Just something I did want to mention. We have the My Team user group that is, in fact, dynamic, where if you add any regular user into the system, they will automatically be part of that group, and you'll be able to share information with this particular group. But it is not our advice to only use that group, because obviously you will have different teams and departments in your organization that will need different level of access to certain data. So by all means, please make sure you have all the user groups, and that will make it a breeze for you to share the information in a way that really makes sense for everyone.
That's a great point, Andre, and actually a really a valuable point to recognize that for those who you've undoubtedly seen this as well. I'm sure that everyone's noticed or seen what My Team is and does. But for those who aren't familiar, want to highlight the fact that yes, by default, as Andre mentioned, everybody is added to every one of these regular users is by default made a member of My Team, which is considered org-wide, right? You're automatically being given access to My Team and everything that sort of typically comes with it. So joining this instance, there's going to be a user group called My Team, and every regular user is immediately a member of that. So that's a fair point. Thanks for highlighting that for us today. Now, user groups, make sure we've got them created. Once you've got your user groups created, you'll then want to also start looking into user types, right? So user types and access roles. Here's where it kind of starts to get a little bit sort of tricky, right? Users can be given different user types. And if I pull up one of my regular users and user type here, I've got regular user, external user, collaborator, read-only, and a contractor. These user types will then will then have potentially user type roles or access applied to them. So this is certainly a way to be able to manage en masse what users can and can't do. Okay, so at first, you may want to create another user type if you wanted to, or stick with the default of admin, regular user, external user, and read-only or contractor in this instance. And then there's functionality that you set up and structure accordingly. So we'll say here tasks and subtasks. You may want contractors to not change an task workflow, right? You may want so that reports can't be accessed by contractors, but in fact, you also don't want them being accessed by external users. So at a user level, you will apply these rules to individuals. So it's a quick way to en masse be able to change what users can and can't do. That's one method of applying rules to users. The other method is through access roles, where essentially using those that same notion of what roles you can and can't do. So there's user types and then roles. We'll say, okay, these bits of functionality are available to folks at a space, folder, subfolder, project level. Okay. Access roles are applied typically at, like I said, the specific folders or subspaces project levels. Where user types is at account wide, once you're giving that user type, that's what you can do at an account wide level. Access roles, however, it gets a little bit more granular and allows you to be able to pick and choose what you can and can't do at specific spaces and folder levels. Okay. And so an example of that would be, let's say here, I'm going to actually create a access role, and I'm going to call it collaborator. No, not going to call it. I'll call it contractor. Contractor access role. Put in the description here. And I need one. Okay. External contractors. Lock it down. Now, I don't want contractors to be able to share internally or externally. So that's fair. Have that switched off. I don't want them creating a project necessarily, but maybe I do want them. Actually, we can create a project. That might make sense. We might allow them to edit project dates. All the various bits of functionality can be locked down here. One of the most common requests that I get from people is I need people to stop creating custom fields, however, right? I don't want people adding custom fields to their instance or to that at a space level. Great. Lock it down so they can't do that. Have it allowed so that only full and editor users are allowed to actually add custom fields, right? So you'll notice that there's an option here to edit folder and project custom field values. That's the value that comes within a custom field for a project. And then there's add and remove custom fields, meaning adding a field to the space or project or folder, wherever this particular rule is going to be applied in a moment. There's also an option here to edit task custom field values. That's editing the value that comes with the task once the custom field has been made available there already. You may want people to not change dependencies. You may want people to not view project financial fields, time tracking. Like I said, all the various bits of functionality are made available here. But this is all great, very powerful and useful, but made incredibly difficult if you haven't created a user group. So back in my Wrike instance, I've just created a space called commission tracker. That space itself by default is going to be private, okay? But the people that I actually want being able to access this space will be my, say, commission team. So I'm going to create a user group here and call it commission team. And I've got some terrible spelling here. And then I'm going to add some members to that group straight away. We're going to add CEO. We're going to add this person. We're going to add them. And we're going to also add PC Gerald. Now, I'm going to add a group administrator to be able to actually add or manage users in that particular group. And great, I've got my commission team. That's the highest level. And then I might want to have a subgroup as part of that team. So we might say CT subgroup 1. That's my terrible, and I'll explain why I'm doing this in a moment as well. But PM Alice, and we'll have David in there as well. And we can go further down with that if we really needed to. I wouldn't get too caught up in the weeds of going too far down this chain, but I'll explain what I'm trying to achieve here. So at an account-wide level, sorry, at a space level, I want my commission team that I just created to be able to access that space. Now, these access roles that we created here, by the way, earlier, this is where that comes into play. So what do I want this commission team to be able to do? Edit, limit, read only, right? What do I actually want them to be able to achieve in this instance? So I'm going to say we give them editor rights and hit save. So now everyone that's a member of that commission team will get immediate access to this space. From a user management standpoint, it means that anytime you add a new user to the space, every time you add a new user to that user group, they will immediately get access to that space as well. So it's a much cleaner way to be able to manage and add users to your instance and share what they can and can't do in that space. Andre.
Alex, we have a question. The question states, if I add a custom field with financial information to my project and share the project with a collaborator, is there a way I can hide the field so only admins see the information in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. So custom fields have another level of permission and visibility in their own right again. So if I add, and I'm going to add a generic field called financial, I'm going to make it a currency value. There is an option here to determine where it belongs, and also specifically who can and can't see it, right? Now, if I'm not wrong, yes. So if you've made it available, what have I done here? I'm going to add my currency field. Yeah. Going to make that currency field available at an account level. And then the option exists here to choose specifically who can and cannot see it, right? So that might be that you only want your commission team being able to see that specific custom field. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, this is great. I think it does. And if it doesn't, please let us know in the Q&A section and we'll try to elaborate more on this.
Sounds good.
Alex, yeah, I guess because the topic is quite complex, we've just went over some of the individual permissions and we talked about access roles, basically, the level of access in relation to a certain subset of information, and also the user types. If we were to summarize, how would you do this? How would you sort of explain the difference in brief?
Yeah, okay, good question. So user types are best used to apply rules to users at an account-wide level immediately. So the moment a user is added and they're given a specific user type, by default, they get a certain level of access at an account-wide level. If you need to get granular and very specific about that, and you need to share what you can and can't do at specific spaces and folder levels, access roles is the better way to kind of handle that. So you can get granular down to specific folders, and you can get or quite broad stroked with user types. I hope that kind of helps summarize that.
This is great. Yeah, and we have individual permissions too. And also something that just came to my mind that I think it would be fair to mention because we didn't quite do so. Some of the functionality that we'll be discussing today is only available at the Enterprise and Pinnacle packages. So if you are on the Business Plus and you're looking into your settings right now and can't find some of the options because they're not available at this tier.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so I wanted to tie back to earlier, you would have remembered I created a subgroup for my commission team. Um, I shared this space with the commission team, meaning that anyone from this level, including the subgroups down, gets immediate visibility of this space. Let's assume, however, now that, you know what, I actually don't want that subgroup getting visibility to this new business folder. Now, because I am on an enterprise subscription, you can actually then specifically choose what can and can't be done at that level. So there's an option here to click on advanced, and I can choose on selective sharing, meaning that now I can remove that entire commission team from that folder, but I only want potentially subgroup members of that to be able to see it, right? So only specific members within that from there below to be able to see this specific folder. Now, CTS1 is visible at the higher space. Sorry, commission team will see the entire space, but further down, I want only these specific members being able to see this new business space. So we can get very granular as well within user groups and subgroups to be able to who can and cannot do or see what specifically as well. And that's literally by clicking on share, clicking on the advanced button here, and getting very granular as to what specific groups can even do within it. By the way, that's another way to also then get even more granular as to what rules you can and can't do once you're within a space as well. So you might want folks to be able to get full access to the space, or better still, we might want everybody to only get read-only access to the space, right? If you're a commission team member. But if you're a member of a specific user group, then you can choose to say, well, actually, commission team 1 will get specifically a set of rules that are going to apply to them. Whoop. We'll say CTS1. And they will get full rights to that particular folder, at least. Okay. So again, quick summary to what as we mentioned earlier, there's user type permissions, access roles that will apply at specific folders and space levels. Another type of space to allow you to be able to lock things down even further is what we call locked spaces. Now, this is functionality that isn't necessarily available to everybody. But there's an option in Wrike to be able to create a locked space. We'll call this a super secure space, right? And I'm going to add my icon. That will be a lock. Now, a locked space, unlike your private spaces, unlike your regular Wrike spaces, a locked space cannot be shared with anybody outside of that space. You have to be a member of that space. You can only work within that space. You cannot share out of that space. Members have to be added to that space to be able to get access to the space. Effectively, nobody knows that the locked space exists, and you cannot share out of it. Now, if you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about exactly, well, if I head over back to my other space earlier, right? And if I remember correctly, there's all these various members of my commission team, and there's PM Alice, David. I'm trying to remember these names, by the way, so I'll explain why in a moment. If I go back to my commission tracker space, you'll remember that it was a private space, but shared with specific people. So if I create or I'm working on a task here, and I, in fact, need to share this task with somebody outside of this particular space entirely, right? And I'm going to choose here, because I can't remember names very well, I'm going to say, let's give me CPO Sandra, right? At CPO Sandra. CPO Sandra doesn't have access to this space. So it's a private space for now, but I need to share this particular task with Sandra. Share and send, go. That same bit of functionality, if I try to do that in my lock space, however, I'm going to call this project. And within this project, I'm going to have you know what, I'm just going to actually try to share it with anybody. And you'll notice that if I click on @mention, it's not going to give me the option. There is no way for me to be able to share this with CPO Sandra. I cannot accidentally select another user. And that's because Sandra is not a member of this space. At this level, depending on what you say, security or whatever you're doing in here, maybe I do want to actually specifically share, rights and access to it. So once I've done that, we'll now have the ability to actually share with Sandra. As the only person that's a member of this space, we can't take this any further out. And there.
Alex, this is a great feature. Who would you say be the, I guess, who would be considering using this functionality? What is this for? Who is this for? Why would you want to use locked spaces and not everything else?
Yeah, let's assume that you're working with you're in a you might be dealing with a mergers and acquisitions group, right? And you may not want that kind of knowledge being shared around widely. You might be a law firm, in fact, and you actually have cases that you don't want being shared or made available to anybody outside the core group of users that are working on a case. So it's in instances where I guess you really cannot have this. You need to put boundaries, secure boundaries around the work that it is you're up to, and you cannot let anybody else know about it. It might be a financial space. It might be you're working on the annual reports, so it might be a space for where you work on annual reports. Cautious that also comes with a lot of work and sharing it with marketing teams and stuff like that after the fact. Like I said, however, you cannot share out of this space, though. You cannot take work out of it. It's in here. It's in the vault, so to speak.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great. And while we're on that topic, there were two additional settings for a space. There was locked space, there was private space, and there was a public space. How would you quickly describe the difference between the two?
Yeah. So locked space is exactly as it sounds. It's a secure vault, right? You can't get out of that. Public, meaning that everybody in the account or my team, right, can get access, or it's made visible or accessible to them. You may not be a member of it, and actually that's a good point there. I'm going to sidetrack for a moment. In this account, by the way, there's more than just these spaces. There are all these other public, I should say, whoopsie daisy. I want to say browse other spaces. There are all these other public spaces that I could potentially join. So if it's been made a public space, it's there, right? But I'm not necessarily a member of it. So that's a public space. It exists. It's there. Anybody could potentially join in if you wanted to. And then to your point around secure spaces, was it a secure space? No, private space. You don't have visibility of the space unless it's been made or shared with you, is the easiest way to kind of explain that.
Perfect. Right on, Alex. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So I've talked a lot about sharing. I've talked a lot about creating or setting up rules around what you can and can't do. Just to recap here, the steps that you want to take to get to that point: create a user group. Okay. Then create specific access roles as to what user groups can and can't do, or alternatively, I should say, use user types where an account-wide level users can only do certain things. Now, as well as all those kinds of elements from a sharing level, once you're in Wrike, it is security that comes with trying to get into Wrike in the first place. And there's a section here, literally labeled as security. First things first, you probably don't want everybody being able to share access to your Wrike instance. So who can invite users into this account? Maybe limit that or restrict it to only owners and administrators. Um, and by the way, as we're making this transition to having spaces and specific space rules around what you can and can't do in a space, um, it makes sense to probably not have that as many account administrators. So allowing users to be regular users, so to speak, and then giving them rights to a space to be an administrator. So I might choose to have, in fact, a specific user, CEO Thomas, to be, in fact, an administrator of this commission tracker space. Okay. And therefore, CEO Thomas will get immediate access to all of these bits of functionality that come with managing work in this space. Should have mentioned that earlier. It's important. Now, and so consequently, we don't necessarily have to have well, not a good example, but maybe you don't want CEO Thomas to be able to get admin rights to all of this sort of stuff, right? So who do we want allowing to be able to invite users? Yes, lock this down to owners administrators. Who do we want to be able to allow creating spaces? Okay, the account owner and administrator with permissions can create all spaces. Maybe you want to select the types of spaces that regular users can create. In this instance, we've selected so that regular users cannot create a space, right? And I would absolutely recommend that you lock these down. This can become cumbersome. It can be a bit of a nightmare down the track if you haven't secured who can ultimately create a spot to be able to work within, because there are rules that you'd want to apply that come with that.
I'm sure Alex speaks from experience here. I definitely had to deal with something like this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I get it. I said earlier, you can join Wrike and you can create a space and folders and permit all that sort of stuff really easily. But you want to lock this one down if you can, definitely. File storage. Maybe you want to only lock it down to certain bits of functionality, right? Maybe you only use SharePoint and OneDrive. You don't want to be trying to open it up to Google Drive and allowing other users to connect right to their personal account or something like that. Password policies. Maybe you want people to enforce specific password strengths, and maybe you want them changing that every, say, 90 days. So we'll give that a good policy every 60 days. We want to lock that down. And again, you don't want users maybe using the same password, password 123, password 1234, password 12345. Yeah, everyone's guilty of it, but you might want to restrict this kind of thing to say the last previous 3 or previous 5, whatever that looks like. Hey, have you been guilty of that?
No, this is no, actually, I'm trying to not reuse the same password. However, speaking of passwords, not everyone is using the password to access Wrike. There is also SSO exists, basically. Does Wrike support that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I wanted to touch on. So SAML and SSO is available to users. The settings, so you'll see down here that is set up SAML SSO. I'm not going to go through the motions of setting up an SSO SAML connection today. I don't have the systems on the other side to be able to kind of handle that. That being said, your security teams, your IT team, if that's yourself, get in touch with our support team. They can very easily help you get set up with those kinds of components. So absolutely recommend if you have that functionality, take advantage of it, get our support team to help you set that up. It's available to you at an enterprise level. One-time passwords, two-factor authentication is certainly a thing. Oop, I almost went past this. Approved IP ranges. Maybe you are an organization that has a secure VPN. Maybe you want folks only wanting access for like when you're in the office. That seems like a wild old school idea. But if you're wanting to actually have if you've got a gateway where everybody has to go through a certain funnel, I guess, through an IP, you may want to limit or specify what IPs can actually, or IP ranges, I should say, can come through to access this account. this is an incredibly powerful way to be able to secure. And I've just realized my computer is up there with that IP range. I probably should have hid that away. Um, this is an incredibly powerful way to lock down um, specific ranges or folks to be able to kind of access your instance as well. Andre.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly add to that that if you're not familiar with the concept, IP address is basically you know, your address on the web, and you let's say you don't want to limit access only to the your office area, but let's say you just want to restrict traffic from to come only from specific areas in your country or in your state, in your city, right? So you want to limit that down. You want to make sure no one accessing it from any other country, as an example, right? You can absolutely do that, and that's the beauty of this functionality, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And another component to that is approved domains as well. Another way to be able to handle that also. So as part of the SAML SSO component, only specific domains are allowed to be added to your instance as well. Two-step verification, external sharing policy. From a Wrike perspective, there's a whole stack of functionality that you can share out of Wrike. Okay. If I've got myself a project, I'm going to add a task here, another one here, another two here, I should say. And then I'm going to create a Gantt chart, right? And this Gantt chart can actually be shared externally. There's also a public link back there on the table view as well, I forgot to mention. But a public snapshot, I want to share that from current state. This is a publicly available link to this particular project, right? I'm going to put that over into the chat. Everybody can join and have visibility of this particular project now, right? But maybe you don't want people being able to do that. Maybe you actually find that could be a security problem, and you don't necessarily want people to be able to do that sort of stuff. That's where this kind of thing comes into play, right? So yeah, lockdown so that folks can't actually share Gantt charts. Public views, you'll have to come with a password, for example, potentially, right? Restricting downloading of files if you're having a file approval that's being shared externally. And again, same goes with analytics boards. Do you want folks being able to access that in the first place? By unselecting those, the ability to share a Gantt chart snapshot is removed. Okay. And of course, a stack of other notifications and your URL whitelists as to if you want to be able to click out of Wrike, what URLs would you be trying to access? Now, I'm trying to think, is there another layer that I am forgetting? We've talked about user groups. We've talked about user types. We've talked about access roles. We've talked about at a security and an account level. Trying to think, Andre, is there one that there's going to be one that I've probably missed, but I want to make sure about that and use this moment as well to throw it open into the floor, I guess. But talk to me.
Nothing jumps at me at this time. I think if not all, we covered most of the ground here.
Excellent. I guess, yeah, I wanted to quickly highlight, I guess, the sharing of a password for things like dashboards and that sort of stuff. These dashboards can be made externally or available externally from Wrike. And this is a classic one. Fantastic. I was hoping I was getting a new one. Give me a new one. Okay. Going to duplicate. No, take this. It's not available to me. I'm going to create a commission tracker and then create a terrible board very quickly. And add a widget for all these lovely tasks. This public link, right? You may want to actually lock that down. And of course, specifically say when this link will expire and whether or not it requires a password. So I'm going to share this right now, right? I can copy the link. I'm going to put that into the chat. People can access that, but you'll probably find you can't do anything about it until you've actually got the password, which I'll also throw up into the chat there. So yeah, that may not actually work. I've got 1 hour left on that. So there we go. That's accessible for folks for a short time only. But it's another important way to obviously secure what folks can and can't see. This might be incredibly sensitive for some for folks, and so I insist that you're careful about what you put up on your widgets. It will be displayed. So if there's custom field values to the person's question earlier about financial fields, if you've made that available to the account and you decide to put it up on the dashboard, that might be something that you really don't want to have being put out. And the day.
Yeah, I think it's not something we missed, but a worthy addition to everything we discussed so far. Let's say an incident happened and we're investigating it. So is there any way to get a user audit into, first of all, who has access to what information at this time? And second, who actually did what in the system recently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess this entire time I've been focusing on locking it down in the first place and haven't thought about, oh, hey, hold on a minute. Something went pear-shaped for us. Good question. So at an account level in settings, there is an option here for accessing an access, or so getting access to an access report, okay, which will allow you to be able to determine what public links have kind of gone out, what guest reviews might be going on at any given moment in a particular space. And then, of course, you can choose, say, at an IT access level, or better still, I'm going to choose my commission tracker and generate a report. We can see here specifically that at the space level, we've got one group and one user getting access to that specific space, right? And then, of course, for new business, we've got that locked down to a specific user group for CTS1. So you can drill down into this. You can also export it to a CSV as well. And then as for activity, right, we determined, hey, whoa. Actually, in fact, someone has been sharing links. Someone's shared a link externally or something like that. Public link has been created of sorts anyway. I need to look at all of that kind of activity that's been going on for the last sort of, say, this month, right? And I need to include the IP address of where that kind of came from, look at specific folders or objects if I needed to, and then create a report. That report, if I'm not wrong, will I'll get to download it, and then I think you'll also be given the option to download it from your emails as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's made available to folks immediately that way.
Perfect. That's great.
Awesome. Is that a question that's kind of come through there? Is there anything that I can help with, Andre?
Yeah, so for the question that came through, my recommendation would be to reach out to our support team, and I did offer the link to the support forum. In my mind, this is worthy of investigating. At least I wouldn't have an answer to this off the top of my head. But Alex, have you had anything else for us to take a look today?
Yeah, one more little thing before I cut this off. So we talked about user types, right? Users, when they're given access to Wrike, will be given user types. Cool. There's a worthy note here that administrators and regular users, external users, collaborators, Andre, if you're able to share for us the link to the default of what those users can and can't do on our help page, I'd really appreciate that.
Oh, totally.
If someone is given a collaborator license, giving them a collaborator license doesn't give them any further functionality than what a collaborator can do, period, right? Being given an external user license means that you're being given access to Wrike as though you were a regular user. But as Andre mentioned earlier, we've got this notion of my team, right? By being given a external user license, you're not an immediate member of my team, so to speak. That's the organization internally itself. Regular users are considered part of the organization, and administrators, obviously, administrator. Okay. But a collaborator will not get any further functionality if you try to change the access roles here and say, oh, actually, you know what? I want collaborators or I want someone being given limited functionality, but I want to change it up so that they can do the following bits of work. If you're a collaborator in here, you're going to only ever be given collaborator access. Doesn't matter what. Okay, you can try and change the full rights. You can try to give them full access, but they will only be able to do what a collaborator can do. I think that's all I want to kind of highlight there because that sometimes throws people off with user types. I've heard and experienced in the past. Oh my gosh, actually a big one. What am I kidding? Yes. Permissions around administrators is a huge topic. Just because you're an administrator doesn't mean that if you're on a business plan, you'll be given all admin rights. Okay, you can be given all the rights of what an administrator can and can't do. That comes with a business plan. At an enterprise level, however, I've got here my CIO, Kimberly, who happens to be an administrator, but then there are certain permissions that we want Kimberly to be able to do at an account level. Now, Kimberly is quite fortunate. She's been given quite a bit of access to this instance, right? But maybe we decide, actually, you know what? I'm not sure why we've given Kimberly the ability to log in as another user. So actually, yeah, let's maybe not do that. Maybe let's not have Kimberly being able to reset any of these other security permissions and things like that. We're happy to give Kimberly the rights to create a private space, public or locked space. That's cool. And again, all the various bits of permissions that come with an account level management standpoint. But this is specific to administrators and what they can and cannot see or do. One other thing, yeah, I can touch on that. You can give folks super admin rights. Users can ultimately get access to an entire account as though they were an account owner. However, you will need to share literally every bit of functionality with them at an admin standpoint level. Okay. So I appreciate the Wrike account owner might be your procurement team. They get the bill, they get the invoices, they'll handle that side of things. But actually, we want IT being able to handle what folks can and cannot do ultimately. And so there will be ultimately an administrator that has full rights to all this functionality.
Alex,
Almost missed that line there.
quick note here. No, you can open that actually.
Oh.
What I did want to point out really quickly is if, for example, your team has just upgraded from Business Plus to Enterprise or Pinnacle, right? And for example, you're an admin and you notice that for some reason you can't access some parts of the system, let's say automations you're unable to access, or I'm blanking on what other things are missing from there. But what I do want to point out here is when your account in fact becomes Enterprise or Pinnacle, those additional security features kick in. And what that means for you is, for example, automations and some of the other things that I'm completely forgetting right now are being stripped away. So by default, they're stripped away from all admins. So you need to go through the process of reaching out to your account owner and requesting these rights for yourself as an admin so that you could manage account level automations and some of the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fair point and good call out as well. Not everybody will get immediate access to everything as they might have had in the past. CEO Thomas, however, might make sense for him to give access for them to get access to it.
The most powerful man in this company.
Any kind of questions any other questions coming through on the day?
Nothing else came in right now. And speaking of that, are we good to go to the Q&A section, Alex?
All right. Well, I'll hit stop sharing on my side.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, we're reaching the end of our session, but we'll give it a minute or two to allow you guys to ask any questions if you had anything. With that said, Alex, you have been very thorough. I really enjoyed this, and I know this has been, we've very quickly covered a lot of ground. So obviously there are questions. Make sure if there is something that isn't clear to you, there's a couple of things you could do, and we'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, you have at least one more minute to to ask us a question.
Throw it in the room. By the way, I had a quick look while you were speaking earlier about folks and what they wanted to get out of the session today. I won't share people's, because for security, I don't want to share people's email addresses or anything like that. But we've got folks that just wanted to kind of get the best practices. So I hope that that person got some value out of today's session, getting Wrike's best practices. A bit of a summary of what security Wrike has. I've certainly smashed through that, so at least I hope I have anyway. And then, of course, how to make Wrike environments compliance with security standards. Yes, when it comes to compliance, by the way, there is a security page for us in Wrike. I'll try to grab that link as well, where you can essentially get access to all of our certificates and our compliances and stuff like that. I'll pull that up and put it into the chat right now as well for everyone. Um, and yeah, things seems like folks aren't having too much in the way of issues or anything like that. Just really wanting to get a better grip of Wrike security functionality. So for those that joined, I hope you got some value out of it.
Totally. One more question came in, and if you don't mind, I'll address that. Can a user be an admin in one space, but a regular user in another space? Yes, something we didn't explicitly mention, but it's a great topic to discuss. There are two different types of admins in Wrike, right? In general, you have your account level and things you could do on the account level, and there is a space level and things you could do on the space level, right? So naturally, we have two different types of admins. You have an admin on a space level that could modify the space, make it more usable for a given team, change settings, and all of that. And that will only be relevant for that given space because in a different space, they might not only be a regular user, they might have read-only access. So if you want to understand that topic a little bit more, I would suggest looking into access roles because that is specifically a level of access in relation to a certain subset of data in your workspace, right? Meaning a given space. So in one space, you could be an admin. In another space, you only could have read-only rights. There will be a third space that you will not even know exists because it's either private or locked that obviously you don't have any rights for.
And whilst Andre was on that topic, I've added a link to the Access Roles help article as well.
Right on. Thanks, Alex. Okay, let's move forward. Just a couple of more things to mention here. Since we covered the Q&A. Okay, let's talk about resources that are available to you. As I said, we covered a lot of ground today. That is quite clear. Let's say you're unsure on how to proceed with some of those functionalities. My recommendation, first and foremost, is to talk to your account manager. They're your dedicated contact for any commercial topics, but they can also answer questions as far as product. If they are unsure how to answer certain questions with regards to the product, you do have access to a customer success manager who is your strategic advisor and will focus on maximizing the business value of your Wrike implementation. If something doesn't work as expected, or you want to clarify how a certain feature works, there is a tech support team that you can always reach out to with any technical difficulties or questions. Make sure you visit our help center, and we've put quite many links into the chat for you today for the Help Center. This is a great resource to learn more about specific functionalities of Wrike, while community is fantastic for learning what's new with the product, exchanging best practices with fellow Wrike users, and of course, leaving feedback, suggesting new product ideas. There is additionally Wrike Discover. That is something I can't recommend enough. It is hands down the best place to learn how to do things in Wrike. And if you're watching us right now, you're familiar with Discover because that's where you registered for this session. So yeah, there is a wealth of interactive training courses available there. Make sure you're not missing out on that. And last but not the least, if you felt like you learned a lot today from Alex, consider partnering up with a dedicated professional services consultant for a few sessions. They will learn about your organization, your team or department, your business processes, needs and KPIs, and will lead you to your ideal future state of Wrike. This is not an overstatement. They will absolutely do that for you. Working with a PS consultant offers the quickest time to value while providing a very personalized and hands-on approach. Make sure you reach out to your account manager or CSM to learn about the PS packages available to you. And this is it. Thank you everyone for participation and for all the questions.